You guys have been asking for some terrifying stories that happened at colleges, so today I'm telling you about 3 separate incidents. Each one had one thing in common: an unexpected lockdown, and nobody knew what was actually happening. The first incident happened during my final year of college. It was a Thursday, and we were in our last class of the day. The next day was the final day of the semester, so nobody in the class was really paying attention. Our history professor could tell, too. Instead of giving us a lecture, he decided to put on an old documentary for us to watch. Everything was completely normal, until suddenly, a sound came over the college's loudspeaker. At first, we assumed it was going to be some ordinary announcement, but then we heard the dean's voice. There was something so unusual about the way he sounded that the entire class went silent. He said, "Lock all doors. Stay away from the windows. This is not a drill." Our professor immediately shut off the video. He locked the classroom door, turned off the lights, and told everyone to sit against the wall farthest from the windows. Nobody knew what was going on. A few students tried pulling out their phones, but the professor told everyone to keep them on silent. About 5 minutes later, we heard footsteps running through the hallway. At first, we assumed it was a staff member or a student. Then we heard a door slam somewhere nearby. That's when we heard a man's voice. He was calling out someone's name. One of the girls in our class suddenly whispered, "That's my dad's name." Before anyone could say anything, the man's footsteps stopped in the hallway. Then there were 3 knocks on our classroom door. Knock, knock, knock. Our professor put a finger to his lips, telling everyone to stay quiet. A few seconds later, the man said, "I know you're in there." Everyone in the classroom froze. He knocked on the door again, this time much harder. Then he said, "Just open the door." Our professor didn't answer. Then suddenly, the man walked away. His footsteps slowly disappeared down the hallway, but nobody moved. About 15 minutes later, the dean announced that police had entered the college and told everyone to remain inside their classrooms. Later, we found out that a former employee had entered the building through a service entrance in the back of the college. Apparently, he was looking for someone and had been going around knocking on classroom doors and calling out to people. Police eventually found him near the old gym. But there's one thing about the whole incident that still bothers me. When we heard him outside our classroom, the name he called was my classmate's father's name. Yet police later told us that the man had absolutely no connection to that family. To this day, my classmate has no idea how that man knew his father's name.
Story 2. The second incident happened during my first few years of college. Our campus was located right next to a residential neighborhood. There were several houses across the street from campus, and you could see most of them from the windows of some of the college buildings. It was a cold morning in November. The sky was completely gray, and it was lightly raining. Shortly after our first class ended, the entire campus suddenly went into lockdown. At first, we assumed it was some kind of routine security drill, but a few minutes later, our professor told everyone to move away from the windows. That's when we saw a police car outside, then another one, and then several more. A few minutes later, the road next to our college had been completely blocked off. My friend Jack was looking out the window when he suddenly said, "There's someone standing on the roof of that house." A few of us looked over. It was pretty far away, so at first we couldn't make out much. But there really was a dark figure standing near the edge of the roof. The person wasn't moving. He was just standing there, staring toward the college. Our professor immediately told everyone to get away from the windows. A few minutes later, an announcement came over the loudspeaker saying that the entire college was under lockdown and that no students were allowed to leave their classrooms. We stayed inside for about 40 minutes. Eventually, things started to calm down. The police left, and we were told to remain inside our classrooms until the next class. Later, we found out that a man who lived in that house had been trying to avoid the police and had apparently made his way onto the roof. He had reportedly refused to cooperate with officers for quite some time. But here's the strange part. My friend Jack said the person he'd seen on the roof was still there when he looked toward the house. According to the police report, the man had already been taken into custody inside the house before he ever made it onto the roof, which meant the figure we saw wasn't him. A few days later, Jack told me something else. He said that when the person standing on the roof was looking toward our college, his face never moved even once. He just stood there. And the strangest part was that the next morning, police couldn't find a single set of footprints on the roof.
Story 3. The third incident happened a few years after I graduated from college. At the time, I was working temporarily as an assistant in the IT department at my old college. The college's main servers, internet equipment, and some of the security camera equipment were kept in the basement. The basement was pretty dark even during the day. There was a small office down there where I worked with 2 other employees. One afternoon, my co-workers went upstairs, leaving me alone downstairs. I was sitting at my computer working on some stuff. Then suddenly, I got a text message. It was from the college's administrative office. The message said, "Lockdown is now in effect. Do not leave the basement." I immediately locked the door and turned off the lights. For the first few minutes, there was complete silence. Then I heard something heavy fall somewhere upstairs. I wanted to call someone and ask what was happening, but the college had instructed everyone not to make any calls until an official emergency announcement was made. So I waited. About 10 minutes later, I started hearing footsteps slowly coming down the basement stairs. Someone was coming downstairs. I crouched down beside my desk. The footsteps stopped. Then someone stood directly outside the basement door. I was practically holding my breath. Suddenly, the door handle moved. Once, twice, then it stopped. I thought whoever it was had left. That's when my phone suddenly buzzed with another message. The moment I turned on the screen, I heard the footsteps outside start moving again. I looked at my phone and saw that the message was from my coworker Mike. It said, "Whatever you do, don't open the door. I'm not outside the basement." I froze when I read it, because just seconds earlier, I'd assumed the person outside might have been Mike. Then a voice came from the other side of the door. "I know you're in there." I didn't answer. The voice spoke again. "Don't worry, I'm here to help you." I still didn't say anything. Suddenly, I heard a noise from the other side of the basement, almost like someone had touched something metal. I slowly turned around. I couldn't see anything in the darkness. Then I noticed that another small door on the opposite side of the basement was slightly open. I was absolutely certain it had been closed a few minutes earlier. Then, suddenly, I heard a police officer shouting from upstairs, "Police! Everyone stay where you are!" The person outside the door immediately started running. Police caught him near the stairs. Later, we found out that he was a former contractor who had worked for the college. He'd been fired several years earlier, and that day he'd entered the building without permission. But the real mystery was something else. When police searched the basement, they opened that small door and entered an old storage room. Inside, they found a bag. The bag contained photographs of former college employees, a list of their names, and several documents that had apparently been collected over the course of several months. I still wonder what that man was planning to do if he had found me down there. And there's one thing about that night that still bothers me more than anything else. When I received that message from Mike, he was actually outside the college, standing next to a police car, which means the person standing outside my door wasn't Mike. He knew I was down there, but how he knew that is something I still don't have an answer for.